Hello my fellow gamers and welcome to another tutorial and introduction video about new indie games. This time I'm going to showcase to you Banners of Ruin, a turn-based roguelike strategy game with RPG elements which is being polished by the developers over at Montebello during its early access on Steam. Here I will explain to you the basics of combat and character progression, how to win encounters, and how to advance through the storyline. Banners of Ruin is based on a premise where you lead a steadily growing party of animal characters through Dawn's Point, a city occupied by an enemy house called Ender. My name is Peter, and if you're new to my channel, I would like to welcome you and point you to a playlist full of similar videos about AAA and indie games. Now, the most important thing to understand about the combat in this indie game is how the board is split into ranks, the vertical squares, and lines, the horizontal squares, and how that affects the turn and moves of the characters. The front and back ranks alternate each turn. This means that only the characters in the active rank can play on that turn. And this is a real double-edged sword, both in defense and offense, because if the enemy plays all their moves in one turn from one rank, you can easily lose a character. But if you split up the enemies into two ranks, using some of the cards which allow you to kick or draw in the enemies, you will lose the ability to hit them simultaneously with skills which target whole ranks. This directly influences your choices when building up the character's abilities and designing your deck, because you want to be able to move enemies constantly and you can basically prevent them from attacking by always shuffling them into the rank which doesn't play on that turn. This does require getting a bit deeper into the city and your game run, so until you earn those level ups and buy or gain cards to make that kind of a deck, you have to use a bit of a different tactic. But before we go into that, let's get familiar with these characters. Although there are 3 teams to choose from right when you start a new game, those being the Mouse and the Bear, the Beaver and the Hare, and Wolf and the Weasel, they are all based on one setup. One hero has a great sword and light armor, and the other one has a hatchet, round shield, and medium armor. But it is their individual RPG progression and cards which makes all the difference as you level them up, choose new skills and passive abilities, unlock or buy new cards, and find better equipment. So the first tactics are based around the simplest game mechanic. Deal more damage to the enemy and kill their units first. But to even get to dealing real damage to enemy units, you first have to get through their armor stat, indicated by the shield icon with a number right here. Do take note that some enemies can regain armor and even upgrade it to hilarious amounts, but we'll come to that a bit later. Attacks which do damage over time, like bleed for example, are good for ignoring armor and dealing damage to enemies' health directly. Bleed can be inflicted by some cards, abilities, and certain weapons. Since I have already explained the basics of the board to you here, you need to learn which enemies you should kill first and how. The weapons these animals wield make all the difference when it comes to their damage. Two-handed weapons allow heroes and enemy units to deal damage to entire ranks at the same time. So while it might seem logical to you to attack those enemies in the middle, which look the strongest, you actually want to take out these enemies with the two-handed weapons first, because they can potentially do the most damage to you. A good way to avoid this double damage is to spread out in 2 ranks, like this. This means that an enemy using a skill or a card or just the weapon itself to deal damage to your entire rank cannot do that because your units are split in 2 ranks. Now if you have been enjoying this video, please do not mind me reminding you to hit that like button below and recommend this video to all new players. You can also subscribe if you would like to see more videos about this and other similar games in the future. Besides just the placement, the order in which you use your cards is very important, and just one mistake can cost you not only the battle, but the entire run, since there is no save or load as this is a roguelike game. The good thing is, there is no time limit when you play your turn, and because of this, you can take time to calculate and plan out your entire turn to deal the maximum damage and combine the cards you have in your hand at that moment. Since some cards do more damage to enemies in the front or the back rank, and some deal damage to the entire rank and even the entire enemy party, you want to try and buff your own heroes and debuff enemies before attacking with those cards. One of the most powerful debuffs is the one which allows you to deal more damage to enemies if they have stacks of it on them. But this is something you gain from different cards and different effects, and you cannot always just get it directly. Sometimes it is created by dealing other types of damage or waiting for the enemy to die while affected by something else. This all requires careful management of the hero's 2 resources: stamina, the yellow icon, and will, the blue one. Stamina regenerates on each turn, while will is limited to what you start each battle with. You can increase both by spending level up points on them, and stamina can be regenerated by some cards in battle. Types of armor each character uses also influences their stamina, as heavier armor reduces the amount of stamina they will regenerate, but it does offer much higher protection. This is though just the starting armor, which is lost in the first few turns, so you might see more use from light armor and more stamina to use cards. But if you cannot draw enough cards to use up all your stamina, then heavier armor is the way to go. Or you might go with skills and cards which let you draw even more cards. This is the beauty of this deck building system, because you can choose a way to play and keep upgrading and expanding it into a sort of a specialization for your party. This specialization is something you can only develop as you play more and learn what are all the buffs, debuffs and damage modifiers, as well as passive abilities of your characters and their special effect cards. So try not to look at party vibes and defeats as lost games, but as scouting, learning and experience gathering. And in a way, the game does award your experience for each run, which you can spend in the form of tokens to improve the base character classes, the warrior, priest and rogue. The only way to advance past each difficult part of the journey through this city is to create a deck which relies on some synergy between the cards, character passive abilities and the character specific cards. For example, if you choose to inflict bleed damage with a hero and his two-handed weapon attacks, you want to have cards which will deal extra damage to enemies inflicted with bleed. If you have a character which can buff his armor to insane levels, then a card which lets you spend all that armor in equal damage to enemies lets you have one hit and one kill combos. Similarly, you can create poison combos and many other ones. But the enemies have these cards and skills in spades as well. So while you do need to have good offensive cards and skills, you want to invest in defensive and debuffing clearing ones as well. A well-balanced deck is much more likely to get you to the end fight with a full party than the one which is purely offensive or defensive. With the game still in development, you can expect some changes in the combat mechanics, but these basics will most likely remain the same. I have personally really enjoyed this game, as well as many other games which come out from the Goblin Studios publishers, who I would like to thank for the opportunity to make this video. And I would also like to thank you, my fellow gamers, for watching this video, and I wish you all happy gaming.